Afterthought thumbs are pretty much the same as an afterthought heel, with the exception of shaping. In an afterthought heel, we're adding a wedge into the middle of a tube. With an afterthought thumb, we are adding a cylinder onto the tube. It does look like it is a V, but that's just where we have added and pushed the fabric apart. Pulling my heel right here, same thing. It's just forcing that open. So for the afterthought thumb, we've simply added a cylinder. I worked mine with ribbing the entire way after one round of knitting to attach my yarn, and but you can do either way. You can work a cylinder of knitting that's just stockinette. You can work ribbing like I did. I did a knit 2 purl 2. Oh, sorry for the shadow. I did a knit 2 purl 2, but you could easily do a knit 1 purl 1. You could do a little bit of stockinette and then finish it with ribbing, however you'd like to, whatever you think looks nice, whatever you think fits your hand better, perhaps. But Afterthought Thumb gets spliced in, and then I added ribbing to the top and bottom to convert my little tube into a fingerless mitt. For my measurements, I only really measured the distance from my knuckle to where the join of my thumb was. I had a tube that was that big. It was that full distance, and I just chopped mine in half. You can do whatever you would like. So let's take a look real quick at measuring for our fingerless mitt. So if you look at your hand, grab a needle to use as a pointer. So if you look at your hand, the space right in here to here, this is what we are cutting and adapting to allow the thumb to exit the tube. So for my fingerless mitt, I measured from about my knuckle, knowing that I wanted the ribbing to start there and go up about 1 inch. So right around here is where I started my measurement, and then my tube was just as far as I wanted it to go based on just, it was half the tube I had. So if you want, though, you can measure to around here where the end of your thumb stops and your wrist starts, and you can put your ribbing right there. And I suggest that because now that I'll try on this tube and show you, but it doesn't matter. It just kind of is a possibility if you want. Depends on how long you want to make yours. As you can see, I didn't weave any ends in. But as I put this on, depending on the sock tube that you use, this one was a 72 stitch, so it is a touch baggy. You probably want yours to be a little bit tighter. So if you have a 64 stitch tube, this should probably work a bit better. But I've got a little bit of bag going on in my wrist. Probably not a big deal, but I did notice that. So if I had gone ahead and started my ribbing right after the thumb and the wrist join right there, then if I slide it up, then it would have snugged it up a bit more right at there and wouldn't have allowed the gapping. So one thing to consider in your measurements. But what I did was I measured from my knuckle to the join right here to put in where I thought, and I kind of just laid my hand down on the tube. I'll do it on the new one. So I spread it out, laid my hand down on the tube. I said, okay, I want the tube to come up this far, and right around here is where then I would need to cut in my thumb. That measurement is about 1.5 inches. So if I can see that, sorry for the shadow. Reposition my light. So it is, there we go. It's about 1.5 inches. However, I did notice, and remember, I'm just improvising this pattern. I haven't done this before. For an afterthought thumb, I've made mitts before, but not the afterthought thumb part. So, but I did notice once I kind of stretched it in, that you can see right here the divide between the blue and the red. That is where the kind of the crux is. So it didn't stop up here because of the way everything distorts and stretches. So that gave me another about half an inch. So what you need to do is, instead of measuring, oh, sorry for my light getting shut off. That's what you get with a touch light. So instead of measuring to here, you want to measure to about the center of your thumb joint. So right about there for thumb placement. So decide how far up your hand you want your tube to come. I can slide this one on. And I say, oh, okay. Kind of stretch it out a little bit. That looks good. That's where I want it to be. So then I come down here. That's the join where my thumb and the rest of my hand are. And then right about here is that spot in my thumb that I was talking about where the cut-in should go. So right there. So if I want my tube to come that far up my hand, then I want my join to be right in there. Because if I do it up here, slide that up, if I did it to where it hit the join of my thumb and my hand, then as I stretch it on, it's going to pull down. So again, sorry for the long rambling explanation, but figure out where you want your mitt tube to stop, and then find that crosshair in your thumb, and that's it. So between the blue and purple right here is a good spot. And it works great in striping yarn because I can say, okay, right there, but otherwise pop a stitch marker in. So I'm going to pull this off and show you again that I'm going to right here on my hand when I make my measurement, not here. Measure to here. Then from there, you can measure from there how far down your wrist you want it to come. So from there to my knuckle is about 2 inches. You can see, and then from there to about where my wrist is, it's about another 2 inches. Could be a smidge less. So you don't need a lot of tube to cover your hand if you just want a shorty mitt that you want to add cuffs to. So we're talking 4.5 inches. Let me put this one back on. So yeah. So this one right here, though, we're hitting 5.25. So let's just say 5. So that's about 5 inches of tube. So if you want it to fit just a little bit less, you can scrooge it up there and say, okay, well then, I could take out a couple inches there. So you only maybe need 3 inches of tube, which is incredible to think about, but shorty mitts don't take up much. So measure your tube, figure out how much you need. So measure from here to wherever up you want it to go, and then measure from here down however far you want it to go. You're going to put your thumb in, which I'll show you how to do. You'll add ribbing to the top and ribbing to the bottom exactly the same. The nice thing about an afterthought thumb compared to an afterthought heel is it doesn't have to line up with anything. You simply figure out how far down in your tube you need to cut in your thumb, and that's it. The beginning of round for the top and the bottom don't have to line up with this at all. So let's go ahead and figure out on here where I'm going to put my afterthought thumb in. Again, going to measure down because I want it from my knuckle, those 2 inches. Because I've already done one, I am going to use that as a double reference point so I can figure out, because I didn't make my stripes match up. So I'm just going to place these together and kind of smush it flat. And you can see that it lines up right here. So where the light blue and the dark blue join, so that's the spot at where I'm going to cut. Now you can also count rounds. So I could count starting here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 23, 24. So there's 24 rounds above my cut line. So I could come over here and count down. 21, 22, 23, 24. Look at that. Yep, right there. So that is where I'm going to do my afterthought thumb. So cutting in your afterthought thumb is going to be like cutting in your afterthought heel. And I went ahead and picked up 2 extra stitches just like I did in the heel, so I didn't end up with holes either. 10 on the top, 10 on the bottom is 20, plus 2 on each side, top and bottom, is 28 stitches total. I'm going to pick up that right leg, but I'm going to pick up that light blue round, angle it better for you, and then I'm going to skip a dark blue round and pick up another round into the dark blue. So I'll go ahead and do that. I have now picked up my 2 rows, 14 stitches on each needle. It's a little hard to see that spacer row in there, but it is in there. So now I'm going to cut. So I will say that you want to pick up and stretch the stitch that is in the center of this. You don't want to come too close because these are actually going to be a little bit shorter of tails to weave in. Not too big a deal, but you definitely need to pay attention to that aspect of cutting in the afterthought thumb. There we go. I now have unworked the yarn, and you can see I have maybe 2. There we go. We have 2 stitches that are still kind of distorting those 2 blue stitches. So with the back needle, I bring it around. I am using magic loop. If you want to use double points, you can. You're just going to have fewer stitches on it. Not a big deal. And you just start knitting. We'll tighten it up later when we weave in our end. One of the things I did notice about those extra 2 stitches, with the fabric already in them, it might be good to knit them twisted. So make sure you twist those stitches, and it can help kind of close up the overlap. So someone asked about the extra stitches. You will have 2 extra stitches on each side, which you can decrease to get rid of, and that would be fine. It's what I did on the other thumb. Snugs it up a little more. And by leaving in that one unworked row into this space, when we get going around, these extra stitches are going to sit over top of stitches already. So those 2 stitches that haven't been unraveled, my new stitches are going to sit right on top of the old stitches. And so the hole that would be created is no longer going to be there. There we have the thumb building up out of body of work. See how the twisted stitch there has kind of cleaned up that space a little bit. And if you decide it's not looking right, you can just drop that 1 stitch down and pick it back up in a different way. Or you can always sew it shut with your tail. See right there how that thumb is just growing up out of body of the work.